everyone, welcome back to the channel. So today I'm going to take a look at the Transformers 2 Series 86 Deluxe Class Brawn. Let me think of this figure in the comment section down below. Is it a pickup or a pass? Now let's take a look at the figure's packaging. So here we have the packaging. Starting at the very front, we have Transformers on the side. We have these 2 Series logo at the bottom done in black text. We have Brawn in white text with a white Autobot symbol. We also do have 86 and 22 because this is the 22nd figure, a part of these 2 Series 86 subline. We have a really cool work shot of Brawn and a really cool running action pose. We have an open window displaying the figure in the packaging. We have the Transformers the movie logo at that top corner there. We have another one at the top of the box itself. And if we do turn to the side, we have 86, 22, and we have 2 Series down the side of the box. We have Deluxe Class in several different languages and a really cool close-up shot of Brawn's head and chest. And on the back of the box, the figure transforms in 23 steps. There's a product shot of him and his robot, his mode, and displayed with his included backdrop. We also do have a brief bio here saying, in an effort to protect the crew, Brawn is the first to act when the Decepticons attack the Autobot shuttle. And on the final side, of course, again, another really cool kind of running action pose of Brawn looking really cool. And that is pretty much it for the packaging. So let's now get into the review. Now, before we take a look at Brawn's mode, I did want to quickly show off the included backdrop. This is the Decepticon Shuttle Ambush. Overall, I think it looks pretty cool. Of course, this is pretty much recreating that scene from the 1986 film where the Decepticons attack an Autobot shuttle and pretty much murder everyone on board. A very iconic and a brutal scene. As you can see here, of course, we have that huge hole in the side of the shuttle there where the Decepticons actually come through and attack the Autobots. We have the Transformers the movie logo on that little kind of display stand piece right there. We do have 8622 and 2 Series down the side done in black text. And we also do have Transformers and that classic Autobot symbol. And since this is a kind of display piece or display backdrop, you can actually grab Brawn and put it on that little stand. And I think that overall looks really cool. That is pretty much it for the included backdrop. Let's now take a look at the details of Brawn's robot mode. Here we have Brawn in his robot mode. Let's take a look at the details, starting at the very top with the head sculpt. We have some really nice light gray for the entire helmet section with some blue for the eyes, some silver for the face. We have some more of this kind of military green for the entire shoulder and bicep, with some silver at the forearm and the hand, with this entire chest section here with some really nice bright orange with some venting detailing and a very classic Autobot symbol. I do like the entire waist done in orange, but I'm not a big fan of this huge exposed kind of pin or rod. Would have been nice if that was covered up. That doesn't look the greatest in my opinion. As for the top of the legs, mostly done in that nice dark green with some silver. Pretty much all the feet are also done in that same green. And if we do turn to the back here, overall, not too bad of a backpack. I really wouldn't say it looks ugly. I do think they probably could have compressed this more, but if you don't know, this actually forms pretty much the entire front half and top of the truck, and it doesn't look too bad. We actually do have the windows and the little spare tire there. I think that overall looks pretty good, but since you actually can see inside this entire section, there's actually quite a bit of hollowness. So all they really needed to do was add an extra hinge, and this could have actually compressed and actually hinged up higher onto the figure, because that actually sits quite low, and unfortunately because of that, it does limit the articulation of the legs moving back. So they did have the space and resources. I think probably it was just the budget that was getting in the way. So just an extra hinge and maybe sit this up a little bit higher on the back of the figure would have made a world of difference, but a very minor complaint. As far as backpacks go, really not the worst I've seen. But as for, of course, articulation, the head cannot look up or down, but it can move side to side. It can actually be a bit tricky to access because, of course, this entire back panel. So there is a bit of a trick if you actually do hinge this out. This is mostly due to transformation, but if you want to hinge it out, you can actually, of course, move the head side to side, and it really can't tilt left or right either. But again, if you do have, trouble actually accessing, of course, just flip this out and it's a lot easier. As for the arms, of course, they can move out and in, forward and back. There is a bicep rotation and elbow to a really good degree on a single hinge. There is no wrist rotation. There is a full functioning waist rotation. You do have to sometimes, of course, move that backpack out, and this can rotate all the way around. Of course, the legs can kick forward, back, out to the side. There is rotation at the top of the leg. There is a knee bend and an ankle pivot to a very good degree. Would have been nice if there was a bit of that filler plastic there, because that's a huge open gap there. It doesn't look the greatest, but this is a deluxe. You do have to keep that in mind. But overall, really good articulation. No, there is no wrist rotation, but I would just say about 50% of the time on deluxes, they don't have a wrist rotation, and it's mostly due to transformation. So that really doesn't bother me that much, but all the other areas are really good. As far as tolerances go, I'd say pretty good. I think there was a few areas that probably could have been a bit tighter, like the feet, the little hinges, you actually do collapse the toes for transformation. Those are quite loose, so it would have been nice if those locked into place a bit better. Also, this entire section here, this actually just hinged down on a pin, again, due to transformation, but sometimes it doesn't really stay tabbed in. There is a tab and slot, but it's actually quite easy to move. So again, that would have been nice if it locked into place a bit better. But as far as like, the main core joints you use for poses, like the legs and the arms, I'd say they're actually pretty tight, not too tight and not too loose, really just kind of in the middle there. But as for accessories, he actually does come with this very simple classic pistol, which is blaster piece compatible and can be stored in his hand, which I think is pretty cool. You do have to keep in mind with Brawn here, he was kind of like the brute of the Autobot team in the G1 show. He never really had a signature weapon like Megatron. Megatron had the Form Blaster and the Energon Mace. Optimus had his Energon Axe and his rifle. That was pretty much their signature weapons. He was kind of the brute of the team. He really just used his hands. He was a big, strong, character, of course, not big as in a big, bots, but he was, of course, really strong for his size. I know I've heard people complain about the weapon being rather boring and bland, but you do have to keep it, be aware that typically with most of the G1 weapons or the G1 characters, their weapons really not that intricate. Optimus's rifle was just pretty much plain black. Same goes as Megatron. It was just a black sort of cylinder. They were very simple. There was no intricate, like Gatling guns or hammers or anything. I guess if they wanted to, they could have been a bit more creative, and taken a different route and included like a hammer for him. But honestly, I think it's fine that they included a simple weapon because again, typically he never even used one. So I don't think they wanted to go too crazy and be a bit, out of the box too much. So I think that's perfectly fine. I think they just wanted to be a bit more, G1 and calm and not too crazy, which works for me. Most likely, probably I'm going to store this weapon on the back anyway because again, he typically never used a weapon. I think I'll probably keep the traditional look from without any weapons, but that's just my opinion. But as for some comparisons, here he is with another G1 mini-bot, that being Cosmos. I think they're overall pretty much the same size. He might be just a tad bit taller. And this one's definitely more wider. He is actually quite compact and boxy and blocky for Deluxe. Here he is with another mini-bot, that being Beachcomber. I think they look pretty cool side by side. Probably two of my favorite Deluxes of the year so far. Probably not my favorite, but definitely in that top 5 or top 10. Highly recommend both of these figures. And for one final comparison, here he is with the last Brawn figure we got from Hasbro, that being the Titans Return Legends class Brawn. So this has actually been quite a while. I mean, Titans Return I think was maybe 5 or 6 years ago, maybe even longer. So I think we were definitely due for an upgrade. I'm pretty sure this 86, in my opinion, this 86 Deluxe class Brawn definitely gave us that upgrade that we were looking for. Of course, since it's Deluxe now, there's improved articulation, improved details, probably improved quality because, of course, there's been such a long span or wait for another figure, and he is definitely more complex as far as transformation goes. I still do like this minicon, but this is definitely the better figure of the two, in my opinion anyway. Of course, let me know, I think these two Brawn figures in the comment section below. Which one do you like more? And I think they overall look pretty cool side by side. I do have to say, I've actually always really liked this lighter shade green. I do like this minicon, but I never really liked the dark shade green. It just really didn't work for me. But that is pretty much it for comparisons and this robot mode. Let's now get down to transformation. Now for transformation, what you're going to do is fold in the hands, just like that. Then you can actually rotate at the bicep. Do the exact same thing on the other side, just fold in the hand, rotate at the bicep, just like that. Then you're going to get this entire hinge this down at the shoulder, just like that. Do the exact same thing on the other side. As you can see, there is a tab there, and there's a slot on the underside of this panel. Then you're going to hinge this entire chest panel out, rotate at the head all the way around. Then you're actually going to rotate this panel to reveal the front grille section of the truck, and then just fold this back in just like that. And then just kind of move the arms out for now just to get some added clearance. Then you're going to go to the backpack here, hinge this entire section out. Then you can rotate at the waist, so the front of the legs are now facing the back of the figure. You're going to collapse the feet in like that, the foot and heel spur, collapse those in. Then you can actually get the entire arm, use this butterfly joint, and hinge this entire section to the back of the figure to actually reveal another part of the window section for the truck mode. Do the exact same thing on their side, just use that butterfly joint, hinge this entire section back. There is actually 2 tabs, one on the shoulder, one on the form, and of course corresponding slots on the other arm, and just align that up like that. Just tab all this into place. Then we can actually go to the inner part of the leg, untab this panel, and fold this out. Do the exact same thing on their side, just fold this out. And then you're actually going to get this entire hinge here, and this is actually going to form the entire side of the truck mode. Do the exact same thing on the other side. And how this is going to kind of tab and connect, there is actually this entire foot region that's going to fit into this gap, and there is actually corresponding tabs and slots for the front grille section, and of course this section right here. So that's just going to line up all like that and tab into place and form the side of the truck. Do the exact same thing on their side. That's just going to tab into place. And actually where the knuckles are, there is slots on the knuckles and tabs right here, and that's just going to tab into place like that. And there is these 2 tabs here, and of course slots right there, and that's just going to tab into place as well, just to line that up. And then you're going to get this panel here. There is 2 slots and 2 tabs, and you're just going to fold that down and tab that into place like that. And that is pretty much it for transformation. Let's now take a look at the details. Here we have Brawn in his truck mode. Let's take a look at the details. Starting at the very front, we have some really nice silver with this entire front grille section here, as well as the headlights are done in silver and green with some more on the top as well, done in green with some silver at the rims. I did like this little box or kind of stripe of orange at the bottom. We have a huge auto symbol done in red, looking very classic on the front hood with some really nice nut and bolt and windshield wiper detailing. We actually do have the windows. Interesting enough, for this deluxe class figure, they actually decided to paint them rather than using a clear or transparent piece of plastic, which is pretty interesting because typically for deluxes to leaders and commander class figures, typically we do get that clear or transparent piece of plastic. I think the reason why they probably painted them with this figure is because it does look a bit more cartoony and a bit more accurate to his G1 appearance. I've never really had a problem with transparent or clear plastic. I know some people do because it definitely is more prone to breaking and cracking, so of course there is a risk factor in taking that option or that opportunity, so probably is a bit more of the safer route. Again, I never really had a problem with either. I just think this probably looks a bit more cartoony and a bit more accurate to Brawn's appearance. But again, if they used clear plastic or transparent plastic, I probably wouldn't have been bothered or mad, but this probably looks a bit more accurate and a bit more cartoony in my opinion anyway. But if we do look at the side here, of course we do have the wheels done in black. I do love the little sculpted in indents with some silver at the center of the wheel with a really nice mushroom peg. Unfortunately, yes, all 4 wheels do have mushroom pegs exposed. It does look quite ugly, but I do have to say with this case and with this figure, I do kind of cut some slack on Brawn here because he actually is quite complex for a deluxe. You know, his transformation is very intricate. There's quite a few panels and there's a lot packed into this figure, so I'll cut some slack. Of course, if this was like a terrible deluxe, you know, I'd be like, wow, how can this get any worse? You know, with the wheels, but it's already a really solid deluxe. There's a lot packed into him. You know, I think he's definitely better than most other deluxes than we've seen in the past couple years and months. So honestly, a few problems like this, I can easily put a pass on because there's other areas that are just so surprisingly good. Of course, I just cannot be mad. But if we do look at the top, of course, we actually do have a spare tire here, and it's actually removable, which I did not know was a feature going into this figure before I purchased it. So if you wanted to have maybe more of a clean top of the truck, you can just remove it and put it off to the side. Do keep in mind, if you remove the tire, there will be an exposed open port there, kind of a hole, so that won't look the greatest. So probably I'm going to tend to leave that wheel on because you can actually store the blaster on top there as well. So probably if you do remove that tire, you also do eliminate the storage of the blaster. And again, as I mentioned before, I do like the windows, but unfortunately they got a little bit cheap and decided to not paint the back window, which isn't the greatest. Honestly, they only had one more window to do, so they really should have just painted that back one. If you do like to custom paint your figures, of course, this is a perfect opportunity right here. I do like the little canisters and boxes though, and again, there's another little sculpted and windshield wiper, which is really nice to see, and it overall rolls pretty well across the ground. As for accessory storage, as I mentioned before, the little blaster or pistol can just store on the top there with that wheel or spare tire. And as far as accessory storage, that's really all I know of. There's no other secret way. Maybe it would have been nice if there was an alternate way, like to store underneath the truck, but that's pretty much it, and I think it looks okay. And this blaster is blaster piece compatible, in case you're wondering. And now for some other comparisons, here he is with the Legends Titan Return Brawn, which I have to say, I've never really been a big fan of the shade of green. I do really like this Legends class or Minicon figure. I've loved it for a while, and I've had it for like 6 or 7 years. It's a good Minicon or a good figure, but I've never really liked the dark shade of green. I'm actually really glad they used a lighter tone of green. I think it just looks a bit more classic and more accurate to his G1 appearance. Maybe that's what they were going for. They were going for more of a dark tone Brawn. I really don't know, but I never really liked the dark tone green. I think it looked a bit too kind of serious and dark. I like this lighter one. That is just my opinion anyway, but I think they look pretty cool side by side, and you can definitely tell, of course, they definitely share design cues. Of course, they both have that spare tire on the back, the entire kind of front grille section here, but I think they overall look really cool side by side. For another Comparison, here he is with Cosmos. I think they look pretty cool side by side. And for one final comparison, here he is with the Netflix Deluxe class Bumblebee, another classic G1 character. And honestly, I think we should probably get an updated Bumblebee, because, you know, you do have to keep in mind the Netflix Bumblebee here does share, of course, the same mold as the Earthrise Cliffjumper. He is technically just a repaint retool. It is a good figure, but I think it would be awesome to see maybe a brand new, not, you know, used from the Earthrise Cliffjumper mold, just a brand new mold like Brawn here and the Stu Series 86 line. Or they could do it in the third year of Legacy. Either way, honestly, I would just love to see a brand new Bumblebee. Again, this is a good figure, but it is just a repaint retool, so maybe a brand new figure, maybe just as good as Brawn. I would actually really love to see that. I think that'd be really, really cool. And that is pretty much it for comparisons and this mode. Let's now get down to reverse transformations. You're just going to remove the entire blaster, and you can actually keep the entire spare tire on. You do not have to remove it. If you do, if you want to, of course, go right ahead. You're just going to flip to the back, of course, hinge this entire panel up like that and collapse it against the back. There is 2 slots there and 2 tabs right there. Then you're going to unhinge and untab this entire backpack section, or the back of the truck. There is 2 tabs there and slots right there. So just kind of hinge that out of the way for now. And then you're going to get the sides of the truck and untab them and fold them back like that. As you can see, this entire foot section kind of fits into that entire little groove. And of course, there was corresponding tab slots all the way down there, and that's how that was tabbed into place. Just fold these back to the back of the truck like that. Then you can actually fold this entire section in like that and tab that into place. Same thing on their side. Then you can fold out the feet like that. And then what you can do is actually get the arms and just separate them like that. They're actually quite secure. And then you can use this butterfly joint and fold them forward like that. And how the arms were tabbed in places, there is actually a slot and slot, and of course a tab and tab. You can then rotate at the bicep, bring the hand out like that. And then what you're going to do is open up the chest, get the entire front grill section, rotate this around on that pin. Then you can actually rotate the head all the way around and of course collapse that back in. And then what you're going to do is get this entire section here, hinge this up. As you can see, there is a tab there and a slot on the inside of this panel. And that's just going to tab into place. Same thing on the other side. Then you're going to rotate at the waist all the way around, so like that. So the front of the legs are now facing forward. And then you can just collapse this entire backpack section up. And that is pretty much it for the reverse transformation for Brawn. Let's now get down to the final thoughts. Now for the final thoughts for the Transformers Studio Series 86 Deluxe Class Brawn. I think overall this is a really good figure, starting in the truck mode and starting off with my complaints, because that's actually where most of my complaints are, of course, of the 2 modes. I definitely think this mode should use a lot more paints, because pretty much the entire back section of the truck is quite bland and boring. There's actually an entire window that they didn't even really bother to paint. Speaking of the windows, interesting enough, they actually did not use clear plastic or transparent plastic for these windows, which is typically what we see for Deluxes, Voyagers, and Leaders, and even Core classes sometimes. But it's actually a bit more cartoon accurate to actually just paint the windows. I never really had a problem with clear plastic. I know some people just despised it because they're worried about it cracking or breaking, which is a valid complaint. I actually did quite like clear plastic or transparent plastic, and I'm perfectly fine with them painting it, especially with this 86 Deluxe class figure, because again, as I said, it is a lot more cartoon accurate to, of course, his original G1 appearance. So I actually do like that inclusion. I do like that detail, but it really would have been nice if they painted that back window, because it's completely unpainted. It's really just kind of that dark green, and there's actually quite a bit of dark green, so maybe they could use some more silver, maybe some black or red. I actually do like the spare tire at the top of the back of the truck. Interesting enough, it's actually removable. I really didn't know that was a feature before purchasing this figure. I was really surprised when it popped off. I was like, oh no, did I break it? But apparently it's removable. I'm not really sure why. I guess you can use it for like something else, or like, I don't know, you can maybe recreate a scene of like one of his tires falling off and you can repair it for like some stop motion or photography. Really up to you how you want to use that feature. And of course, his simple blaster can be stored on top. I know quite a few people have actually had a complaint with the blaster. I know it is quite simple and small compared to, of course, this deluxe class figure, but Brawn, he's always been kind of like the brute of the G1 Autobot team. He never really used an iconic, signature weapon in the G1 show. You'd like Megatron, he had his, Energon mace, his like purple mace, his, of course, Forearm blaster. Optimus had his giant rifle and his Energon axe. Brawn never really had a weapon. He was kind of just like a hands-on-hand fighting type of guy, which I actually kind of liked about him. He was kind of the brute, the strong character of the team, even though he was quite small. So I think the small, simple blaster definitely works for this character, because even taking into account, just putting off aside this Brawn character, most characters or most figures from the G1 series never really had that complex of weapons. Typically, they were kind of just small, simple, like, black rifles, white rifles. There was never any crazy, huge, interesting, intricate weapons. So I think it definitely suits this character, because he is quite small, and again, he never really had a signature weapon. So if you wanted to, you could just leave this blaster off to the side. I think that would be perfectly fine. But I actually quite like it, and I'm pretty sure it is Blast Piece compatible. As far as complaints go for the truck mode, that's pretty much it. As far as things I do like the tires. Unfortunately, they are a mushroom peg, but I do like the little indents they actually did in the tires, and the little silver is nice. It would have been nice if they maybe covered up the mushroom peg, because this is probably one of my least favorite designs of wheels. I actually did recently take a look at Detrius. He did have mushroom pegs, but they were actually completely covered up. But in this state, with this design, of course, they're quite obvious, and it doesn't look that good. That being said, it overall does roll pretty well, and again, I do like the kind of spare tire type design. It's interesting. I'm not really sure why it's removable, but it's a feature. I do like the huge Autobot symbol on the front hood there. It's actually really big, really classic red. I do quite like that, and there's a lot of details at that front grille section, which I do have to say kind of adds further insult to injury, because there's a ton of details at the front half, but when you do look at the back half, it is quite boring and kind of plain. I'm not really sure if that's what they were going for. I do know most G1 designs, they are quite plain. There's not a ton of surface detailing. They are quite simple, really just mostly solid colors, like, Optimus and the G1 show, he was mostly really just like red and blue and a little bit of silver. There was not a ton of intricate details, so I do understand they are going to be more of the simplistic side, but it does seem like, the front half is quite detailed and the back half is very simple, so a few more paint-ups probably would have made the world of difference. I do like the sculpted in little windshield wipers at the back window and the front window. I do quite like that. As for transformation, this is definitely one of the major pluses for this character, because it's actually a very complex transformation, but not complex to a point, where it's hard or annoying or, difficult. Just for a deluxe, I think it's like 25, 28 steps. If I'm correct, I'm pretty sure it is over 20 steps, but that is quite a bit for a deluxe, because most deluxe class figures, I'd say they're below 20, sometimes like 22 at max, but it's actually quite a few. And also, not really the steps are hard, it's just like the engineering they actually use. There's a lot of techniques and pieces and movements that I'm typically not used to seeing like on any figure, let alone a deluxe. It's actually a really good surprise. I did watch quite a few reviews before seeing this, and I was aware, it would be a bit more complex, but I didn't know, like, all those interesting engineering techniques, so I was surprised by that, and it's actually very fun to do. Again, I wouldn't say it's like a hard transformation like you don't want to do. There are some figures that are just so difficult and hard, you just loathe transforming. This is definitely not one of them. I don't want to discourage you from getting this figure or transforming it. It is still quite fun, but it's actually really interesting to see so many interesting, complex steps for a deluxe class figure. Typically, really only see those for leaders, in commander classes and occasionally voyagers. But as for his robot mode, I actually do quite like it. Some people have actually had complaints for the head sculpt being inaccurate. From what I can remember, it actually seems pretty spot on. I do have to say the color matching is pretty off. If they were trying to be accurate to his packaging art, they did not do a very good job, because the entire kind of brown silver color for the main helmet section or the main head section of the head sculpt is completely different from the box. On the box, it's a much darker gray. On the figure, it's a much lighter gray, but of course, if you do like the lighter gray than the darker one, I guess you're really happy. But I do think probably if you did quickly, look at the G1 show, he probably did have a darker gray color-wise, but people are actually complaining about the entire molding of the head sculpt. I never really have had a problem. Again, it's actually been quite a while since I've seen the G1 series, but from what I remember, I actually think it seems pretty spot on. I wouldn't say it's perfect, but I really wouldn't say it's bad. As for articulation, I think it's overall really good. No wrist rotation, that's mostly due to transformation. Also, Deluxe, it's about 50% of the time Deluxes don't have wrist rotation, so it's no real surprise there. But he does have a waist rotation, and he also does have an ankle pivot, which is really good to see. Tolerances-wise, probably could be better. I think a few of the joints could be a bit tighter, and also tabbed together a bit better. Also, I do think the feet probably could be bigger. He doesn't really have a problem with falling over. I just think the size of the foot is way too small compared to the rest of the figure, because, again, Brawn was, in size quite small, but of course the figure itself, the proportions, he was quite, big and bulky. He was kind of a brute. He was a small brute character. He was really strong. And I think the feet just seem a tad bit too small in comparison to the rest of the figure, because he's quite boxy and blocky, his chest, his arms, his head, and the feet just seem a tad bit too small. So maybe some bigger panels, it would be more of a complaint if this figure was actually falling over. It doesn't fall over, it's really just appearance-wise, it seems a tad bit off. Also on the backpack, really I don't have many complaints. It's not an ugly backpack, he does have one, but I do think they probably could have added an extra hinge and maybe collapsed it a bit more, because the backpack does have a tendency to kind of hinge and sort of move occasionally whenever you're posing the figure. Also, there's quite a bit of hollow space within this area. This entire section actually forms the backpack for the robot mode, and it does somewhat fold up in the robot mode, but you can actually pretty much, look in there, and there's quite a bit of hollow space completely unused. So honestly, if they added an extra hinge and maybe folded up or hinged up a bit more, that would actually allow for extra articulation in the legs, because unfortunately the backpack does hang quite low, and the legs are slightly limited because of that. And since there is space, there's some hollow gaps in there. There is completely, perfect amount of room. They really just needed add an extra hinge and maybe just hinge it up or collapse it up a bit higher on the back so the legs can kick back a bit further. So that does kind of puzzle me. I guess maybe if this was like a Voyager, like, Hot Rod or Rodimus, they made that Stu Series 86 Hot Rod. He was pretty much like the size of a big Deluxe, but priced at a Voyager. So if they wanted to do the same thing with this, maybe they could have just added a few more pin-ups and added that extra hinge. I would probably call this like one of the best Deluxes of the year. Probably not my favorite, but definitely in the top 5 or top 10. It's a very good figure, but there is a few things that do kind of make me question, like the, access amount of space in that backpack. They could have easily hinged that up. But as for the rest of the figure, detail-wise, it's really simple, very G1 accurate, just an all-out really fun figure. I don't buy a lot of Stu Series, figures 86, and not 86 like movie toys, but I'm actually really glad I picked up this one. I do highly recommend this figure. I do hope you enjoyed this review. Of course, please leave all your thoughts on this figure in the comment section down below, and I'll see you next time.